Welcome to Rewilding Love. This season is with a couple on the brink of divorce.
This is episode 7, Mateo's insight around his bias.
I may have just made the biggest mistake of my life.
I don't understand where things went wrong.
In any given moment, his vibe just changes, and it's like, boom, like you hate me all of a sudden.
It's a ride at a fun fair. We go up and down. We are in up mood and we love each other, and we go into low mood and we hate each other.
See, for the most part, I'm Pirates of the Caribbean where there's only one drop and one rise, okay? Everything else is pretty fucking flat in my life.
Right.
Hers, it's corkscrewing, it jumps the track sometimes, like, it does crazy shit.
I'm not this monster.
We want her to decide what to do about the relationship when she's on stable ground. I'm not saying that she would need to stay with him.
And you just walked in the house and everything was cool and chill?
Yeah, everything was cool and chill.
It's like borderline psychotic.
What if we could somehow find a way to make you poke-proof?
I'd just rather not get poked.
The emotion that came up yesterday that was really heartfelt, that's who you are. That's your innate natural state. That's how you want to connect with this world. That's the sweet spot. The rest is just stuff we make up.
That was good. Some deep shit. Yeah.
You are listening to Rewilding Love with me, Angus Ross.
And me, Rohini Ross.
Rewilding Love is a podcast about relationships.
We believe that love never disappears completely in relationships. It can always be rewilded. Listen in as we guide a real couple back to their natural state of love.
Relax and enjoy the show.
I feel badly now that I said that you pulled the short straw with Mateo, because in this session he really let go of his defensiveness and opened up and saw some really great things.
Yeah, no, I'm so proud of him. I'm so impressed with how he became so open to this whole experience and became really quite vulnerable. So yeah, you spoke out of turn.
I did.
There's one thing that was occurring to me this morning when I was thinking about you was that because and it's kind of cool that you bring up the awkwardness issue, because it's kind of, I wonder, and I'm just curious about this. I'm not suggesting this is what's going through your mind with deference to separate realities. You might have a completely different feel for what's going on, but there's that sort of, I kind of got a sense yesterday that there's a sort of even a sense self-created limbo that you've created in this relationship, in the sense that I know that you talked about that, you had the divorce papers, what was it, September?
Yeah.
And those are kind of like being in the background, they're on the back burner in a way.
Yeah.
So that for me was a kind of a bit of a red flag for the relationship, just because I'm like, wow, I wonder what it would be like to be the other party who's kind of like having to sort of walk around on eggshells. That would just be my spin on that. I would feel
absolutely.
like that's what I would feel like if I felt like Rohini had like had divorce papers and we're just like, well, we'll keep things as they are, but we'll see how they go.
Yeah.
I would really not like that.
Yeah,
That would be really awful for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Like,
Yeah.
I totally screwed the pooch in that, but at the same time, it's kind of like I said, poking the Buddha, right? So the Buddha's going to be super calm and neutral, but after a while, you keep poking the guy, he might tell you blunt honesty, and that's what occurred in our relationship is, I kept on getting poked, and it's just like, I'm here in this straitjacket, not feeling well, right, and feeling lonely, and then out of outburst to get out of the shackles or whatever you want to call it, it was, this is how I feel.
Yeah.
I'm releasing myself, this is how I feel. I'm hoping that you can interpret this information the way that I hope, which is probably not reasonable to be like, someone tells you like, oh, I want a divorce, and you're like, oh my God, I'm totally going to be, this dream person for them. That was probably what my hope was, the best case scenario, but that's not real life. So I know that placed a larger burden on the relationship.
Yeah. With a relationship, you're all in until you're out, in a sense. Because that's kind of like, okay, you could bring up the idea of divorce and you could have papers, and that's very much in pretty much concrete terms. But it's kind of like, even now, within that situation, you could be all in until you're out. So when I say all in, you could be at least all in with the same level of vulnerability, or with a level of vulnerability that wants to sort of, like, there's a, you've actually told me that you want, it would be amazing if we could figure this out, and you kind of want that. There's a part of you that wants that. I don't know how much of you wants that, but I get a sense there is a part of you that wants that. So if you do that, then what have you got to lose then by being all in terms of how you show up and how you present yourself, but in a true and honest and vulnerable way? In terms of you being all in and you show up and you're totally your honest, vulnerable self without the defenses up. And the defenses are all about, I don't want to get hurt in this scenario. Mm-hmm. But based on what I spent a long time yesterday trying to point out this idea that you can't be hurt by her. Only you can hurt yourself. It's only your thinking that's hurting yourself in this situation.
Right.
I know that's like a really major thing to get a hold of, because I went through it. All the people I know have got into this understanding. They have to get through that big problem of flipping that around.
Yeah.
But she can't hurt you. Only you can create your own mental suffering. Mm-hmm. So that's the thing to get flipped around. But if you can show up and just be yourself without the defenses, because that must be quite exhausting to have to keep those defenses up all the time, I imagine.
Yeah.
It must be a burden to carry.
For both of us.
For both of you, definitely.
Right.
So and you might not stay together, you might get divorced, but what have you got to lose in the sense of like, yeah, I can show up and I'm just going to be my vulnerable self. I'm going to put all my chips on the table. This is who I am, and this is how I'm showing up. If that's not going to work, and if that's not going to work where I'm being my authentic, vulnerable self, then then maybe you're not right for each other.
So when you're listening to podcasts.
Yes.
Too bad you're not on video right now. So when you're listening to podcasts and they say, we'll be back in a moment.
I do know that.
They usually play some kind of ad.
Yes.
Well, I think we should take a pause from Alicia and Mateo for a moment.
Really? Why?
Because I think we should talk a little bit about...
Have I done something wrong?
I think we should talk a little bit about the process of making the podcast.
Okay.
Because it may sound like fun and games when people are listening in, but sometimes it's far from that.
Yes, sometimes it's very far from that.
And I thought it would be good for listeners to know that, just know more about what our process is.
Okay. Are you going to lead with this example?
No, I was going to ask you to share about your difficulties with it, because you seem to be more challenged than I am.
Yeah, sometimes it feels like pulling teeth. I think that part of it is that we do it at the end of the week generally. Well, Friday seems to be my worst day to do it because I tend to feel a little fried on Fridays. Mondays are better because I feel well rested after the Sabbath.
That's not true. On Mondays, you say, oh, I ate too much chocolate over the weekend. Oh, I don't feel good.
I have to have some joy in life.
But you often say on Monday, oh, I ate too much.
I do feel like crap on a Monday generally. So it probably doesn't go well on a Monday either. No, I think that sometimes I feel like I just don't know. It's I don't know why. I don't have a bit of a block around it. It's one thing to sort of sit down and have a conversation with someone in a living room or a bar. Not that I frequent bars per se. But it's another thing to sort of like be facing someone else with a mic stuffed in my mush. And
someone else meaning me.
Yes, meaning you. And then to have this sort of deeper, meaningful conversation when you're feeling like you'd rather be doing something else. But I want to have that deeper, meaningful conversation, and I guess there's a certain amount of pressure around it too, because I feel like there are times when I can be listening to you and you're saying something really insightful. Now, without the mic or the recording, I would just be able to appreciate you saying something meaningful and insightful. But sometimes when you say something meaningful and insightful, and you've taken 10 minutes to do it, I'm like, oh God. She's saying something really meaningful, insightful. I need to have a really good response. And then when I start to have those thoughts, obviously I'm not listening to what you're saying. And so I might have missed 5 minutes of the meaningful and insightful because I've had to listen to 5 minutes of like, wow, that's really cool. And then there's another 5 minutes, oh shit, what do I say now? And if I say the wrong thing, it's like, oh no, that's all going to go up in smoke and we're going to have to go back to square one. But I guess we do have the luxury of maybe doing some creative editing, which maybe we're going to have to explore more, so I don't have to feel under so much pressure.
I don't think I've ever talked for 10 minutes straight.
I don't know. I think you'd be surprised.
Certainly not saying something.
I think, you're having such a good time that time just, flies by.
Or maybe it just feels like that long in your mind.
I don't know. Maybe. But yeah, no, I think that's kind of really what I'm up against is that I feel I put myself under all this pressure to sort of show up and sound half decent.
Well, I also think that we are being required to dig deeper in terms of our own understanding doing this podcast in terms of our relationship.
Yeah, no, it's kind of like this is sort of parallel sort of lesson going on.
Are you going to serve me with divorce papers?
No, I guess because I'm all in. I better not. And that's the other thing. I have to worry about talking too loud because then I might, go an octave too loud and then upset the whole recording.
It would upset our sound engineer.
Yeah, our sound engineer wouldn't like that. So all these things to be mindful of. I feel like constrained. I feel like I'm in this little room with rubber walls. Not rubber walls. What are they? What is it exactly?
I don't know. It's some kind of sound protection. Sound. I don't know. What is it? Sound.
It's made of foam. I guess it is foam. It's grey foam. I feel encased, contained, constrained. It's not the ideal setup to be Angus.
Having to sit still.
I know. Listen. Exactly. Having to sit still and stare at my wife and look like I'm paying attention. It's too much pressure.
So why are you doing it?
Well, I like doing it. I like it when it works and listening back to it. I like the idea of a podcast. I don't know. It's just and obviously, ultimately, it's hopefully providing a service. People are going to be able to derive some value of this experience that we've had, and hopefully, we're going to be able to garnish it with some valuable teaching points. So yeah, on that level, I think it's a worthwhile thing to do. I don't know. I have struggled with the doing, but I've enjoyed the completion process.
Well, I just wanted people to know a little bit about the behind the scenes. That it's not all as what would Alicia say, rainbows and unicorns.
Yes, it's not all fun and games.
That's right.
That's what I would say.
And it does feel like a worthy cause, so we do hope that it's enjoyable for people.
Yeah, it is. It does feel like a worthy cause and a good service, hopefully, to humanity on some level. And that will remain my compass point.
So shall we resume now?
Yes.
Well, back to the section that we just listened to. I don't know if Mateo realizes it, but it really seems as if he's painted himself into this corner by threatening to serve the divorce papers to Alicia. You're looking at me very quizzically.
How do you paint yourself into a corner?
Isn't that a saying?
Paint yourself into a corner?
I think it is a saying.
It can't be.
It is.
It's a very surprising visual for me to behold.
It's a tricky situation where you make a mistake and paint yourself into a corner because you can't get out.
Well, where would that have come from? Paint yourself into a corner.
Some painter. I don't know. I've heard it.
It just seems an unlikely thing for someone to do.
Well, it's not a good thing to do.
I guess not. There may be more, I don't know. It just conjures up an unusual image, but I'll go with that.
I'll look it up, but I'm sure
I mean,
it's the
it's
same.
like some sort of thing that decorators live in fear of.
I think so.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean, though?
Yes, he painted himself into a corner.
And he's made this, very strong threat. And it's not helping rapport in the relationship. It's not improving the relationship. And yet it's on the table. So what else is he going to do?
Yeah, he's painted himself into a corner.
See, it's a good expression.
It is, maybe. Yeah, I mean, it's just as far from ideal, let's say. And Alicia must certainly feel like she's walking around on eggshells. But there was a little light at the end of the tunnel. I guess that my line of, I wouldn't say a line of questioning, the line of inquiry, as it were, was to try and sort of cajole him into putting himself in her shoes, which I think he got to that point. And I did notice quite a good degree of compassion come up in the cadence of his voice. So I thought that was quite heartening.
Yeah, he definitely seemed to have some insight. And the other piece that I thought was really important that you were emphasizing that I think is a really great point, not just for this couple, but for couples in general, is the recognition that it's actually easier to be all in a relationship than it is to be one foot out the door.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if I am to reflect on that, I would say that it must take an enormous amount of bandwidth to keep one foot out the door, because you've got to sort of maintain this stance. For him, it's a case of like, I'm going to wait around for Alicia to change, and then we'll be all good. And she's got to tiptoe around, making sure that she doesn't make the wrong move. But I imagine, for couples thinking in those terms, it's kind of like, yeah, they're going to not be able to be present in the relationship because they're going to be thinking about how to, make this all work, or how this isn't working, and how, what is my escape plan if it doesn't? And that must take up an enormous amount of bandwidth. So how do you be present, and how do you, be vulnerable, or how do you really be able to look for the good in the relationship when you're using all your creativity absolutely, in a sense, by trying to, figure out your exit plan.
Yeah, and I can speak to that firsthand in terms of our relationship. There were many years when we were...
Oh, really?
I think you knew about this already. But where I was really working way harder than I realized I needed to, because my natural inclination and desire was to be all in and to have a relationship that I could be open and vulnerable and intimate with. But because of my own fear of intimacy and my own feelings of fragility that I wouldn't be able to handle what might come up in our relationship by sort of keeping that door open or one foot out the door, it took a lot of effort and wasn't going with the natural impulse of what I really wanted to do.
Right. So if you weren't painting yourself into a corner in that situation, what would you have been? If you were a decorator trying to figure out an escape plan, what would you be doing? Digging a hole in the floor, knocking out some drywall?
I would have been climbing out the window on the 5th floor, trying, and then realizing, I don't want to go down there.
Maybe you could parasail or something out of there.
Well, no, I wanted to be all in.
Oh, okay, yeah, you did. Thank you.
Well, in the next section that we're going to listen to, I really, really love what you did with Mateo in terms of opening up his eyes to bias that he wasn't even aware of.
Yeah, let's see how that unfolds. You're kind of a little bit hot.
Are you talking about my looks?
Well, your looks and also your volume.
At the moment, it seems like you're kind of like, you've got your defenses up and she's wanting to like, you know, get in there and figure out what's going on. But if you're not present for her in that way, and it goes both ways, you know, we kind of like put our barriers, we have our own inimitable ways of putting those barriers up. I mean, it sounds like you're more inclined to sort of shut down and not want to like interact. She wants to interact because she wants to find out what's going on.
Like overly offensive.
Yes.
Like offensive, not offensive.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you've basically, I don't think you've got anything to lose just by like, you know, saying what's on your mind, but just having that sort of idea in your head that, it's better if I deliver this information neutrally rather than it's kind of like I'm just throwing a bomb here and then I'm going to walk away.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a thing that I have to learn though too, is like, what is the difference between what I perceive as a neutral way and then also what's the difference between, hey, I'm being poked, how much more neutral can I be rather than just giving this person the bomb that they're asking for?
Yeah. What if we could somehow find a way to make you poke proof?
That would be sweet.
Like she could have her moments of crazy, which we all have our moments of crazy.
Absolutely.
Maybe her crazy is a little bit more developed than others. I don't know. That's not for me to say. But what if we could figure out a way where you didn't have to take any of that personally? You can be poke resistant, but also there's a sense of freedom in your head going on in your head at the same time.
I'd just rather not get poked. Like, that's the thing.
I know, but it's because you're taking it personally. And I know, and I understand. I can see, you know, where you're coming from is like, you don't want that to be your home environment. But it's basically, it's all of this is going on in your own head. It's all stuff that you're creating your own suffering.
It's relentless.
It's relentless.
What happened this morning? It was, I'm drinking coffee on the balcony and she's on her phone looking at Instagram. Oh my God, I love Napa. Wouldn't you like to go to Napa? That was number one this morning. Okay?
Okay.
That's not like that happened last week or 4 days ago. No, that was this morning.
Okay. Well, that's an innocent comment.
Sure. But after receiving that quote-unquote innocent comment a million times and knowing that many of the times that question, maybe different location, different scenario is being asked, there's a background question which is going on.
But is that all that she said? Did it then go on the usual trajectory that you just outlined about?
So today it was, I just said, I'd love to go to Napa again.
Okay.
Right, and the conversation just ceased.
Okay.
There was a unicorn this morning. I want everything to roll smoothly, and I want to know that when I'm having these conversations with my partner, there's no underlying real deep question that they're trying to get answers to, which is a lot of the time, right? And it occurs many times where it's like, what do you think about this, or where do you want to go do this, right? And it's one of the scenarios that I'm saying, and like I said, I put up walls and just like, no.
So for this morning, she made what could be interpreted, you know, if we were a fly on the wall and we're not privy to all the other
BS,
in the past, is she makes this innocent remark, and then you immediately go into sort of almost like that Pavlovian response of like, yes, this is the narrative that I'm familiar with, and I have my narrative that lines up with that. And so what our hope for this weekend was that is for you to show up with an open mind. So in a sense, that is a very narrow focus. We're really like asking you to sort of widen the shot and look at the whole picture.
Yeah.
And have an open heart. So it almost reminds me of there's a commercial that I saw. I was reminded of the other day years ago in England. It's like, it's so old, it's in black and white, but it was a really cool commercial, and it was for a newspaper, and there are three different shots, and it's talking about perspective. So the first shot is a close up of this skinhead running towards this guy with a briefcase, and he comes up with the guy with the briefcase, and the guy goes on the piece like this, and then the next shot is of a guy who's walking down the end of the street. It's a little bit wider, And he sees the skinhead running towards this guy and the guy puts up his briefcase, and this guy starts running towards him because he thinks obviously the guy's going to get mugged or something. And then the wide shot is like scaffolding falling down and is about to crush this guy, and the skinhead actually saves this guy's life. So it's kind of like there is a parallel for me, because if we have our narrow focus, like you have obviously a formidable intellect. There's no doubt in my mind that you have a very, very powerful intellect. But the intellect is all about figuring things out, creating stories, like using all the data that we have stored away here as reference points for how things are going to unfold. So this morning, that's what was going on. You're in your intellect, you figured out the story, you know this pattern of behavior, it all makes sense. But that's a narrow perspective as far as your relationship is concerned. Your relationship has got so much potential just because you have the full scope and the power of the intelligence behind life at your service at any given moment to give you a fresh new thought, a fresh new perspective.
Yeah, I understand. And I do see that by approaching every situation with the same story in my head doesn't allow for growth in our relationship and growth within myself or herself.
You, with your formidable intellect, have pigeonholed her in a way that, okay, I understand this animal now. That's probably not the right term. I understand this human now. This is who she is. I've completely figured her out. And there's really no wiggle room. I filed it away. She can change, and if she changes, we'll be good. But it's kind of like, that's who she is at the moment, and I'm not really seeing any different. But this morning, that could have just been, I can say make random comments, probably sound nuts. But in the moment, it's kind of like, yeah, I like to go to Napa and drink wine.
Yeah.
That might be how I wake up today. But you've made it something so much more.
Yeah, I have. But I've also been Pavlov's dog, conditioned to think that way.
Yes.
Right? So it's not just by my own accord I came up with this in my head.
The thing is, that's not who you are. You're not Pavlov's dog. You're not that hard drive of information. You're so much more than that. Like that, the emotion that came up yesterday that was really heartfelt, that's who you are. That's your innate natural state as a human being. That's who you are. That's how you want to connect with this world. That's the sweet spot. The rest is just stuff we make up.
I just love where you got to in this section with Mateo. I especially love, I don't know if you noticed it, but there was that, for him, a fairly long pause after you talked about how he had developed this narrow perspective on his relationship and that he wasn't seeing the potential because he was so caught up in his condition thinking about it. And then there was this pause, and he finally says, yeah, I understand. I see by approaching every situation with the same story in my head, it doesn't allow for my growth in the relationship or the relationship to grow or something like that. I mean, to me, that was him seeing something pretty profound.
Yeah, that was really quite a beautiful moment. And to be honest, I think I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, he did seem, it would appear that he did really see something there. And that there was this long pause as the penny dropped. And I was actually, listening to that back, when I was harping on about the intelligence behind life and that you're so much more than the narrative that you've created in your conceptual mind. I was kind of anticipating, I didn't know what to expect. I was just thinking, is that going to really resonate with him? And I don't know if that gave him cause to pause. Cause to pause? Is that what you would say? Well, I'm saying it anyway. If that would give him cause to pause, whatever came out of that created a level of reflection that allowed him to see something differently, which I thought was really refreshing.
Yeah, and what led up to that, I think, from what I hear when I listen to that, like the cognitive dissonance between you and him, because he goes from saying, she's relentless, it's relentless. And he's like, just this morning, you won't believe it. It was crazy. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what happened this morning? And she's like, what was it? I want to go to Napa. Do you want to go?
That's right.
And you were just kind of incredible. Like, is that it?
It's like, I know but I am sure I was expecting her to say something. I want to kill my mother-in-law.
And so I think that example and your genuine, like, what? That innocent comment? What are you talking about? I think it really helped him see, like, oh, wait a second here. Because when you really, like, looking at the transcript or listening to that, it's like, what on earth did she do?
Yeah. I mean, I guess that was the point where he suddenly realized, I have kind of created this crazy narrative. Bless him. But he has, he's got a really good mind. He's created this really interesting story in which Alicia has very little room to maneuver outside the constructs and constraints that, in his mind, that's her identity now.
Well, in a sense, it doesn't really matter what she does because he's going to see her through that lens.
Yeah. Although, at some point there was a little glitch in the matrix and he's seen something new.
I would say there's a pretty big glitch.
Yeah, let's hope so.
And then, leading into this next section, it seems like with him being able to sort of let go of that narrative about how annoying she is, how much she bothers him and keeps poking him, like as that sort of slipped away, he actually in this next section I think gets to kind of a deeper concern that's going on for him.
Oh, awesome. Well, let's see what's cooking.
There are also other scenarios, though, in our relationship where my heart has been very open. It's very open, and just one thing is, I worked as a valet driver in Laguna Beach, and I was always approached by a lot of homeless people with mental illnesses. I did a lot of volunteer work at the hospitals in high school and before then, and
great.
have a soft spot for all of that.
That's amazing.
And I get emotional, like I'll cry about stuff like that. And I remember as a kid, we'd go to Mexico and I'd be eating with the family and seeing a kid begging, and I would just break down in tears and I couldn't eat, and I'd pretend to tell my parents like, oh, I just, I don't feel well, but in my heart, what really was is the pain of seeing this person suffering while I have quote unquote everything at my fingertips and I can't do anything for this person, right? Other than feed them today. I can't help them further than just in that present moment. So going back to my experience, I dealt with a lot of homeless folks with mental illnesses, and I really developed this soft spot knowing that a lot of these people, it's not their own choices that have led them to that. I also had a friend in college who kind of came down with schizophrenia, so I knew that it was possible that their choices didn't lead them to homelessness. So I'm being very open, and the things that she had to say, which is what I brought yesterday, the ignorance, the blatant ignorance, really upsets me, and it gets me disconnected from the ignorance and the person who is spewing the ignorance. So there was times where she's just like, I'm afraid of all homeless people. They're all by choice. They're all criminals. And I'm there thinking, I'm like, wow, I've been touched so many times by someone's story